Welcome to another episode of Pembroke Today. I'm Julie Thompson, and I'm the guest host today for Ed Thorne. Welcome, Ed.
Julie, always a pleasure, and I'm always glad to host the show.
Yes. So we have a lot to talk about in Pembroke, and let's start off with an auction that the town is having this Friday.
Friday the 14th.
Yep, right. Friday the 14th.
Right. And so what's interesting about it is that the last couple of years that we've had these, we have actually hired a professional auctioneer.
Yep.
And as you can tell from the printout from the town's website, it's very professional.
Yep.
They do a great job of identifying the properties.
And this is all just property. This is not cars. This is not equipment. This is all just property.
Right. We do that. The selectmen do the separate property auction, and we do that almost on a yearly basis. Here, Kathleen McCarthy, our treasurer collector, takes a couple of years to compile this list of surplus real property.
Yep.
And what's interesting about it is that this year, not only do we have houses that are on there like we sometimes do, but we also have an extraordinary large parcel off of West Elm Street, which is really going to generate a lot of interest because it's over 44 acres.
It's huge.
Originally, it had been approved for a subdivision.
And how long ago was that? Do you know?
That's about 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So, and Kathleen does, a really good job of working with these property owners to allow them to make their payments, but sometimes they just can't.
They can't.
And
then you take it back. So the town owns all these properties now.
Yeah, and the property owners, after it is foreclosed on and taken by the town, they still have another year to redeem the property.
Right.
So in a couple of instances, property owners do come back in front of the selectmen and pay off that debt. A lot of cases, especially with the case of some of these that we have here now, they didn't make the payment within the year.
The amount of time, right.
So
everything was followed by the book. The policies are in place, the rules are in place, and I know the town always tries to do the best they can to work with property owners because nobody wants to lose their property.
Absolutely, and we, and Kathleen and her folks just bend over backwards to ensure that person is pays their.
Now, if you look through these, quite a few of these have houses on them. A couple of them have perk tests listed. Some have septic. Some are just properties, and 2 of them are landlocked. So when people go to these auctions, how much information besides the little tidbit that you have here can they actually find out about the property?
Oh, absolutely. Number one, they're, invited to come into the assessor's office and the treasurer collector's office to view the property cards that are associated with that.
That's before the auction?
Oh, absolutely.
Happens? Okay, so people have to do their due diligence if they want to go find out about these properties. Okay.
Right. And, and some of the landlocked properties that you're referring to have been, in some cases, maybe donated to the town as surplus parcels that have been part of a proposed subdivision on some of these. So
that they didn't end up using.
Yeah, and some of these are, mostly abutters would be interested in increasing the size of their own property.
Right, because a landlocked property, you can't get to it from anywhere.
Yeah,
unless you go through a butter's land and they give you permission to do that.
One of the interesting things about the West Elm Street property is that I believe that there's going to be an abutter that may be involved with the sale of this property or the auction of the property, in which they don't have frontage on a street, but they have a right of way.
Okay.
Through property.
Yep.
So
that's a legal right of way.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so that's going to be an interesting scenario. So we expect a large crowd on the 14th at Veterans Hall because of some of the properties that we have and the size of them.
The size of them. So I had asked you before the show what you thought you could bring in income from these properties.
It is really hard to say, especially now, with, a potential subdivision property.
Yeah, 44
being
acres. That second
market.
one on the list here is the first one is 44 acres.
And several of them that have houses on them.
Yeah.
So anything that we get out of that, will be part of revenues for fiscal 19. and then will be part of the town's surplus revenue at the end of the year, or free cash as they call it.
Yeah.
Excuse me, in Massachusetts. And so that we're looking at possibly squirreling that aside for capital improvements so that we don't have to use recurring revenues
Right,
to pay
to do that,
for
right.
trucks and,
Yep.
and police cruisers and what have you.
Now, who decides where, let's say we get $3.5 million, let's just say, crazy, we get $3.5 million for all this land. Who decides exactly what happens to that money?
Well,
Who's the decision maker?
Well, it'll be a decision made by the treasurer collector, the town accountant, Mike
Yep.
Buckley, and myself, and we'll make that recommendation to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, excellent. And the only other question I had on these are the ones that have the houses on them. Are the houses acceptable to be lived in? Are they condemned? Are they all individualized? And I mean, do you have to tear them down? Are they up to code?
Well, it really is going to be up to the person that purchased the
Okay.
property. I mean, you know, whether it's going to be a fixer-upper and they flip it, or
Yeah.
whether they renovate it, or they can move right in. And we have various conditions in
Yep.
some of these buildings right now. And so we'll just see what some of these individuals, you know, want to do with the property once they purchase it from the town.
Okay, and clearly these are all zoned for residential, or are they mixed zone?
Right now, to the best of my knowledge, they're all in residential A areas.
Okay.
I don't think we have any that are in
I didn't-
residential commercial that
Yeah, I
would
didn't
be
see any
along
that
Route
looked.
53.
Yeah, I didn't see any that looked that way. Maybe there's one piece of land, but that was it. Okay, so the last question I had for you is: do the abutters to this land get any say whatsoever on who purchases it?
Now they're on equal footing with the guy from Timbuktu.
Okay.
That's just like.
Okay, this is the way it is.
Yeah.
This is the
You
procedure.
know, they may have more interest, obviously.
Sure.
And you know, it'll be interesting to see, and with some of these properties, how the bidding goes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very interesting process, and I believe this might be the third time we've used these folks as professional auctioneers to conduct this. And
do they get a percentage?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Right.
And they will
So-
get obviously top dollar for us, and then so you don't
Absolutely.
mind paying the percentage.
It's a fascinating process,
Yeah.
and I almost wish that maybe we televised it to that.
It's
So
that-
that might be something where we may look at in the
Yeah,
future.
definitely. Okay. Anything else you want to say about this auction? Everything's available online on their website, so people have a week, even more than a week, to look at all these properties and make inquiries, and if they're interested at all, they can go to Town Hall. And
That's correct.
can they go on the properties themselves and
They can.
actually view
They
them?
actually can.
Okay.
That's correct. And then, of course, all this information is on the town website.
Right.
And of course, while we're talking about this, one of the things that came out of the last special town meeting was that the Board of Selectmen, were given the property on Washington Street.
Yep.
17 acres.
Yep. That used to
and
belong to the
we-
school.
It
Yeah.
used to belong
Yep.
to the school, and we're probably, going to be in a situation where we market that.
Down the
to-
road. Yep.
as a potential source of
Sure.
revenue, whether it's recurring, whether we lease out the land,
Yep.
or one-time purchase. And then,
Perfect.
of course, we have property across from the parcel that we purchased a couple of years ago for a potential public safety building on the corner of
Yep.
14 and 53, where the
And we own
old
that
fire
now, but-
station is and all that. So
Nothing's been officially decided on
no,
that yet.
we're still
Talking
looking
about
at
it. Okay.
marketing that as well.
Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the budget. Now, when you think about this, you're talking about the budget for the 2019 through 2020 year,
Right.
right? Isn't it kind of early to be looking at that budget now?
I think a lot of towns have started this process at this time of year. We start gathering the information before the holidays, and then usually by February, the 1st of February, then I make a budget presentation in front of the advisory committee and the Board of Selectmen. However, knowing what we know about the prospects of 2020 and the fact that our budget is very, very tight
Yeah.
in this year that we're in, excuse me, that we asked the departments to start compiling
yeah.
their requests, and so we had asked them to prepare all their budgets and submit it to us by November the 30th.
Of this year?
And then,
Okay.
and then by December the 5th, we would have a review, which is tomorrow,
Right.
of reviewing the budget. And then I informed the school committee and the Board of Selectmen that we would make a budget presentation, a preliminary budget presentation, next Monday evening, the 10th.
At the selectmen's meeting?
Right.
Okay. So just so people understand, in our town, budgets are really kind of divided into 3 silos, if you will. You have your school, which for every town is a huge budget item. You have your town government, and then you have the fixed costs.
Right.
That there's really not a lot you can do about.
Well, if you, and looking at the overall budget, let's assume that next year's budget is going to be 67 million in
Okay.
that range.
Okay.
The school department will probably be about half. They'll be in the 33 to 34
yep, million. Okay.
million range. Town government will probably be in the 12 plus million range, and that includes, public safety, fire,
Yep.
police, public works, town hall government,
Yep.
culture and recreation, which takes up the library and the recreation department, council on aging, health department, the veteran services, things like that.
Yeah, anything that's either town-sponsored or part of the town of
Right,
Pembroke.
and that is about half of the half.
Yeah, right. Gotcha. That's only 12. Yep.
Right, and
Yep.
then the other half of the half
Yep.
would be what, as you mentioned, are the fixed costs.
Yeah,
And those are things like health insurance, for instance.
which keeps going up.
Well,
So how do you circle that square when every year that's going up?
And it's contractually obligated, for the 4 unions that we have in the town, and,
Right.
and of course the teachers and the associated school unions.
But that comes under the school budget, right?
No, actually, the fixed costs are shared costs, as
Oh.
they say. And so, let's say that all of the employees in the town,
Yep, including the school employees.
including the schools,
Okay.
Let's say the number's a little under 500.
Okay.
About 3/4 to 2/3 would be school personnel.
Okay.
But the entire budget is under that one particular line item. And so that in itself, a category called benefits and insurance,
Yep.
is worth between 13 and 14 million.
Just for that one line item.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we're talking
Yeah.
benefits and insurance is equal to
All
paying for
of
all of town
Government. Yeah.
And so that makes up the other half of the town budget.
Right.
You've got fixed costs like property and
Yep.
casualty
Yep.
insurance. I mean, we have to insure all the town buildings.
Absolutely. Everything has to be insured. Clearly.
And
Yep.
Probably 70 to 75% of all the buildings that are insured are the school buildings.
Right.
All
The-
5 school
right,
buildings.
have to be insured, right.
So,
So let me just go back to the health and the benefits. Does that also include the retirees and all their benefits?
That's correct.
So that all comes under the fixed cost too?
The town pays into the Plymouth County Retirement Program,
Yep.
which is the retirement program for all town employees except for teachers.
Yep.
Teachers are in what is known as the Mass Teachers
Right.
Association retirement system. So we have that line item in our benefits insurance. We have the health insurance.
Yep.
We have the property and casualty insurance.
Insurance, yep.
We have workers' compensation
Yep.
that we have to handle.
Yep.
And we've become self-insured with that this year.
Now,
So
does legal go into fixed costs also?
legal is actually part of town government.
Okay. Because you do have to have a lot of things vetted by your attorneys.
Our legal budget alone is over $100,000
Right,
a year,
right.
which is typical for
Yeah,
community
absolutely.
our size.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about the town department heads that brought you their budgets. Do you see anything unusual? Do you give them any kind of guidance? How many of them get overtime? I mean, there's so many questions that people don't understand at all about.
Well,
Town government.
our department heads are really great about that. They know the drill.
Okay.
I mean, we don't have any rookies that are there.
Yep.
They're all very used to the budget process. They might throw in something that they feel is absolutely necessary, but what we're trying to do is to get away from having any kind of the special surprises for the fall town meeting.
Right.
And try to insert it into the budget that we have in the spring. The goal will be to go into the next fiscal year with a balanced budget. Now, that's something we're going to be working on in the next 5 months. If it means trimming somebody's budget,
Yep.
maybe not filling certain personnel slots in certain positions. I mean, those are conversations that I'm going to be having with the department heads between now and March.
And what do you do about the COLA, cost of living adjustments? Do you have to do those every year, or no? Is that more in the private sector that's more involved?
Well, no, we got right now we are concerned with the 2 of the 4 unions on the town side. They have contracts through next year.
Okay.
Fire and police, their contracts expire June.
Okay.
Obviously, non-union personnel, are at the mercy of, the budget process.
Right.
And then, of course, I understand that the school department, teachers, their contracts are up in June. So these are all things that, we'll be factoring in when we look at FY 2020.
So they took all those things into consideration, these department heads, when they brought you their budgets in November, correct?
Yeah.
Knowing that the contracts were up and new contracts would have to be signed, and do their budgets reflect what they want in the new contracts as far as raises?
No, what we told them was that if your department has union personnel that is contractually obligated next year, then you factor in, that contract raise.
Okay.
If your department does not have any union personnel that are under obligation for next year,
Yep.
then level funded
I
from
was
a
just gonna ask that.
personnel
Yep.
standpoint. And Mike Buckley, the town accountant, and I, have made plans
Yep.
to set
Go
aside
through.
a
Yep.
provisional budget for there.
Okay. Now, overtime. How many departments actually budget for overtime?
Well, obviously, the big 3, Public Works,
Yeah.
Fire, and Police
Right.
do.
Yeah.
We have smaller overtime budgets for some of the town hall departments. And that's something that, we're going to be looking at because the town is open, Monday nights. The people that work then are entitled to overtime or comp time. If they work a normal work week and then work extra on Monday night. So we're going to be looking at that, whether or not that, maybe not being open on Monday night,
Or can you just
closing early on Friday.
Switch shifts?
Yeah, and that's something that we'd like to look at.
Yeah.
I think that if we want to work a straight 37 and a half or 40 hours a week,
Yeah.
then we would say, all right, maybe we do want to stay open on Monday nights.
Yep.
Maybe we'll close early on Friday, like
Right.
95% of the towns on the South Shore do.
Exactly. Now, what is the difference between capital budgeting and regular operational budgeting? So,
Well-
and that comes up a lot in town meetings. The
Right.
department heads need capital money for capital projects, for big purchases.
Yeah, a fire truck, for instance.
fire truck.
That's a capital purchase.
Exactly.
Now, it's not something that would be included in Chief Hill's budget on a yearly basis.
Sure, that's not his operating budget.
It's a one-time purchase.
Yep.
A plow truck for the DPW, a police cruiser. We had a couple of purchases in the spring that were made, and then some in the fall town meeting. For instance,
So does everybody actually plan for that? Is that part of their budget? Do they say, here's my regular operating budget, and I can see for the next year or 2 or 3, this is how much I'm going to need to spend on capital?
well, for the last 8 to 9 years, we've had our own capital improvements plan.
Okay.
And we've had department heads that would do their wish list going out 5 years. We decided that we would have even a more formal process. And so we hired a consulting firm with the help of some money from the Community Compact Program to have a formal capital improvements plan, a 5-year plan. that company right now is working on that. It's made up of several former town managers, so they know the drill, and they are in the process of putting that together, and we're hoping to have that presented to the department heads and the Board of Selectmen and the school committee at the 1st of January. So we're looking forward to that, and we're hoping that we do the capital improvements as part of the town budget in the spring.
Yeah.
We're trying to get away from the fall town meeting.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why we've had to have a fall town meeting is that we never budgeted enough money for snow and ice deficit.
Exactly, right, every year.
And so at the end of the year,
Yeah.
we always have a deficit, and that deficit is required to be balanced because you can't set a tax rate, an official tax rate
Right.
for the next fiscal year unless you send a balanced budget to the Department of Revenue.
And that's a law, right?
It is the law.
That is the law.
That
Okay.
is the law.
So you have to have a balanced budget before you can do anything with your tax rates.
Right. Now, we send out tax bills quarterly.
Yep.
Sometimes the first 2 tax bills are estimates.
Yep.
But the last 2 bills
Or actuals.
need to be actual. Need
Right.
to be actual.
And we all don't like those when they go up.
Right.
Now, what about overrides? Well, you know, when does that come into being? That
Well, I think the negotiations and the discussions that the Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Committee and the school committee are going to be having the next couple of months will go a long ways in deciding whether or not the projected budget for the town for FY 2020, whether the revenues are sufficient to sustain the expenses that are being projected. Right now, it appears that there's going to be a fairly substantial deficit based on the requests that have been made.
Right.
Now, that's not to say that the requests that have been made by all the departments is going to get funded.
Right.
You know.
Well,
But
especially in that case.
But
Right.
right now, as the case almost every year, you know, there is a deficit.
Right.
And so what we do is do our best to trim the expense side, really examine the revenue side of it, and then look at the middle ground and see whether or not it's acceptable for the school department
Yeah.
and for town government to accept what is there.
Right.
And if it's not acceptable, then that might be the case for an override.
So, and let me ask you this, and this is probably a bit of a painful question, but it seems that the town of Pembroke approves spending all the time at town meeting. Very rarely is something shot down. It causes great consternation, especially to the people who crunch the numbers. So can you address why you think that happens?
Well, I think that's one of the things that's unique about the town meeting form of government. You know, I was telling the staff a couple days ago that when you're under the city manager or mayor council form of government, you set the budget, and that's the way it is.
That's it, right. There's no discussion.
There's no
Yeah,
discussion.
yep, there's no discussion, right.
No amendments to it or anything. But in Massachusetts and in New England with the town meeting form of government, that the ability to adjust the budget occurs.
Right.
And, you know, and it was the will of the 150, 200 people that were there, you know, to say that, yes, we want more police officers.
Right.
Yes, we want
Yeah.
more firefighters.
Right.
Yes, we want this. Yes, we want that.
But sometimes the town meeting will approve something, like happened last year. I think it was for the police department. And then in the voting, they turned down actually funding it.
Well, that's because
So-
last year's budget in the spring was, we had 2 budgets. One that was predicated upon having a Prop 2.5 override,
Okay, right.
which would increase taxes by an additional $700,000 townwide,
Yeah.
not individually.
Right.
And then the second budget was without the override.
Yeah.
And because the override failed at the ballot box,
Yeah.
then Budget B had to be,
Yeah.
implemented by the town.
Yeah.
And that required a couple of more adjustments by fire, police,
Sure.
and obviously Public Works.
Sure. Okay. It's an interesting process, and a lot of people really don't understand how it happens. How do people find out more information about how they can get involved in the budgeting process, or how to learn more about it?
Well, I think just paying attention to what media we have, you know, PACTV, the newspaper, the town website, turning on the selectmen's meetings.
Right.
You know, it's really important that
People are
they
informed.
understand. I mean,
Right.
I think, you know, with a town of 20,000 and you only have maybe 200 people show up at a town meeting,
Yeah.
you know, that's a tiny percentage. And a lot of people accept government for what it is.
Right.
And, you know, unless they unfortunately need fire, police,
Yeah.
or
Something for the schools. Yeah.
something for the schools, I mean, they only, you know, most of them just care about getting their garbage picked up and their street plowed
Right.
in the wintertime. So that's just a fact of life. And
Yeah.
so we have to, you know.
And there's
you
a
know, take that-
constant, there's constantly things that are coming up in the town. The whole community center, that's something that we kick the can down the road all the time. New police, new fire station, we kick the can down the road all the time. Eventually, they have to happen.
Yeah, and it's kind of disheartening sometimes when you see a community that has a new fire station or a new police station or whatever, you know. But you know, our priorities were elsewhere,
Yeah.
and you know, 15, 20 years ago was a new school system,
Right.
and then it was the growth of the community.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been really tough to you know to walk that fine line.
Yeah. Yep. But it exists, and the more people are informed, the better decisions that they can make, and
Yeah,
the better voting they can do. And they
Yeah.
should show up at town meeting.
And you know, we hope that everybody understands why we're doing what we're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a tough process.
It's not random.
No, no.
Not at
It's
all.
not like you're throwing a
Right.
dart against the wall
Right.
and you're going, okay, that works.
Right.
So
And that's another thing. People really don't understand the interworkings of each department and how really well disciplined each department is, and how they try to follow the rules, and everybody tries to do the right thing for the town as a whole as well as for their department.
yeah, I mean, it's just, you
We've
know.
got great people in our
They want
town.
to be able to provide the services
Yep.
to the individuals, you know, whether it's something like the library being open on a Sunday.
Sure, right.
Or the police being able to be in a Memorial Day parade.
Right.
You know, things like
Yep.
that make the community what it is.
That's
and
right.
it just, you know, unfortunately, all that stuff costs money.
Yep, it does. Everything does. So we have to make our decisions. Okay, so the big property auction is happening on the 14th, which is a Friday, at what time?
12 noon,
12 noon at the town hall.
correct.
Interesting. How long does that usually last?
This is going to be interesting. You know, it's going to last as long
As it lasts.
as it lasts.
Okay,
so.
and it'll be really interesting if you had a bidding war between, which I'm sure happens sometimes.
It does.
Yeah,
And,
which would be cool.
We're really looking forward to seeing what is generated.
Yep, let's bring some money in for the town.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much, Ed.
Jules, my pleasure.
And thank you for joining us today on Pembroke Today.